It's 2034. Global trade no longer uses the dollar. Maritime routes are controlled by fully automated Chinese systems, and former superpowers must request authorization to sail where they once ruled freely. Ports that move 80% of the world's goods now operate under Beijing's digital certification. SWIFT has been replaced by something new, something no one in the West controls. Some call it the red shift. Others say it began much earlier, quietly, in the background, while the world was looking elsewhere. Relax, this hasn't happened yet. But the signals that could turn this future into reality already exist. And they're not coming from war, invasion, or military power. They're coming from something far harder to stop: infrastructure, dependency, connectivity, bilateral agreements, strategic debt, and most importantly, functional alternatives. The kind of things that never make headlines, but permanently change the game. If you think China wants to dominate the world with tanks, you're looking in the wrong direction. The plan isn't military. The plan is structural. And it began 40 years ago, without anyone noticing. While the US fought wars in the Middle East, China built ports. While the West debated ideology, China sold turbines, fiber optic cables, and solar panels. While the world argued about democracy versus authoritarianism, China offered loans with no political conditions. Today, we're revealing the invisible blueprint that reshaped the century. The silent design of the new global order. Common belief: China is challenging the US with weapons, armies, and a new Cold War. The real contrast: China never tried to win through force. It tried to win through the system, through logistics, through production, through data, through alliances without ideology, through agreements that turned dependency into power. It didn't need to persuade anyone. It only needed to become indispensable. And when you become indispensable, you don't need to declare war. You simply... Because eventually the world comes to you, asking, negotiating, depending. Today, you'll discover the hidden mechanism that rewired global power, how China replaced military hegemony with structural hegemony, why the West took so long to notice, the three phases of power transition: past, present, and possible future. How this process may redefine currency, trade, and stability. What the real trigger is, the one that could accelerate everything. And where this trajectory leads, if it leads anywhere at all. This is not conspiracy. This is pattern, data, and the way power changes hands when no one is paying attention. China's strategy didn't begin with Xi Jinping. It didn't begin with the Belt and Road Initiative. It began decades earlier, in the 1980s, when Deng Xiaoping decided China would no longer compete with the West ideologically, but economically, quietly. Verified facts you can check right now. 70% of global electronics rely on Chinese supply chains. 90% of rare earth production is controlled by China. The world's largest trade agreement, RCEP, is led by China. The Belt and Road spans 60-plus countries. China leads cross-border payment systems among emerging nations. 80% of Western antibiotics and essential medications come from China. China produces more steel than the rest of the world combined. It built more infrastructure in 20 years than the US did in 100. Now comes the part no one mentions. None of this was accidental. It was design. China didn't invade territories. It invaded supply chains. And here's the most unsettling detail. Most countries don't even know how dependent they are. Modern dependency isn't visible. It's in the chips, in the cables, in shipping routes, in 30-year contracts, in restructured debt. The risk isn't what China controls today. It's what it could disable tomorrow, or worse, what it could condition. Now imagine current trends continuing. No acceleration, no war, no sudden collapse. Just continuity. The world enters stage 2, shift 1. Progressive de-dollarization. Countries begin trading without the dollar, not out of ideology, out of convenience. Saudi Arabia sells oil in yuan. India buys Russian coal in rupees. Brazil trades with China in local currency. Individually, these are small moves. Together, they erode the dollar's function. Shift 2. China becomes irreplaceable. Companies try to decouple. They fail. China isn't just a factory, it's the factory of factories, the only nation with true scale. Shift 3. Global infrastructure adopts Chinese standards. Ports, 5G networks, solar energy, software, smart grids. Not imposed, chosen. Because they're cheaper, faster, and more efficient. Shift 4. Debt-based dependency. Nations in debt to China aren't colonies, but they're contractually tied. Long-term control through port concessions, mineral rights, trade privileges, voting alignment. Shift 5. Geographic realignment. Asia becomes the world's economic core. BRICS expands. Africa aligns economically with Beijing. Latin America diversifies. Europe splits between U.S. security and Chinese trade. This isn't expansion, it's reconfiguration. You don't destroy the old system, you just make it irrelevant. Now we reach the trigger, the moment everything shifts from possible to inevitable. Welcome to the possible future from the opening scene. 2034. The world after the transition. The dollar doesn't collapse. It loses function, not existence. Pacific. Trade runs on Chinese digital standards. Nations rely on Chinese energy and logistics systems. Global banks use Chinese digital infrastructure. U.S. influence becomes regional. Power shifts from the Atlantic to the Pacific. The century begins speaking Mandarin. Metaphorically or not, power didn't change through war. It changed through dependency. No imposition, just acceptance, gradual, silent, inevitable. But what is the real trigger that would make this future unavoidable? The trigger isn't war, isn't technology, isn't a single crisis. It's confidence, or the erosion of it. The accelerated transition begins when nations stop trusting U.S. stability. The U.S. repeats fiscal errors. The dollar loses function, not value. Reliable alternatives emerge. Parallel systems become more efficient. The trigger is simple. The world realizes it no longer needs the U.S. to operate. And when that happens, the transition isn't gradual. It's fast. Not because someone attacked, but because everyone stopped depending. Let's be clear. This doesn't mean China will rule the world, or that the U.S. will collapse tomorrow, or that Beijing is executing a global conspiracy. It's more complex, a multipolar transition. China has its own limits. Aging population, massive internal debt, dependence on imported food and energy, regional tensions, weak cultural influence. But here's the point. China doesn't need to dominate. It only needs to be indispensable, and it already is. For viewers who can't control geopolitics but want clarity, 1. Understand global dependencies. Know where your products come from, who controls the components you rely on. 2. Follow trade routes, not headlines. Real change appears in bilateral agreements, infrastructure funding, payment systems, supply chain shifts. 3. Watch alliances that aren't military. Economics is the new battlefield. 4. Track trust indicators, reserve currencies, payment flows, trade settlement choices. 5. Remember, hegemonic. Currencies don't collapse, they're replaced. The pound didn't fall, it was overtaken. 6. Study how regional power becomes systemic. Power today isn't about tanks, it's about controlling systems everyone must use. Don't prepare your fear, prepare your understanding. The future may not unfold exactly like the opening scene, but the movement toward it has already begun. Silently, gradually, irreversibly. Empires don't fall overnight. They simply stop being necessary. And once the world stops needing you, your power is already gone. For the first time in 80 years, the flow has changed direction. In the next episode, we'll reveal the country that will shape the next decade of global power. It's not China, not the US. It's someone else, completely unexpected. A silent player, a decisive one. If you think you know who it is, you're probably wrong. See you there.